This is a KIII 3 News special presentation. Predictions, patterns, and preparations. A hurricane season special from the 3 News Weather Team. Sponsored by RBFCU.
Hello and welcome to our 2024 KIII TV3 Hurricane Special. I'm Alan Holt.
I'm Carly Smith.
I'm Kristen Walla.
And I'm Faith Colbert.
Heading into the 2024 hurricane season, all indicators are pointing to an active season ahead. As we prepare for what could be a very busy year in the tropics, our mission is to be a reliable source for relevant, timely, and accurate weather information when it matters the most, and all with the focus on our community first.
And just like every storm is different, the way you prepare will be different than someone else. This will be my first full hurricane season in the coastal bend, and I'll share what I believe is most important for me and my family.
If a storm comes, do you know what to do when and if an evacuation is ordered? We'll guide you through the process and who is responsible for making these tough decisions.
Let's begin with what hurricane season is. It runs from June 1st through November 30th, with the climatological peak of the season coming on September 10th. This happens as sea surface temperatures warm and winds become more favorable for tropical development. The shallower Gulf of Mexico waters can and often do spawn tropical activity earlier in the season as the sea surface temperatures become warm enough to support that tropical activity more quickly than it does in the Atlantic. We saw early season development near the coastal bend as recently as Tropical Storm Bill and Hurricane Hannah, which took out Bob Hall Pier.
Hurricane Hannah was a Category 1 hurricane that moved in about 150 miles south of Corpus Christi. When we reference categories of storms, we are using the Saffir-Simpson wind scale, which talks specifically about the maximum sustained wind speed of a tropical storm or hurricane. The most powerful storms on this scale are what we refer to as major hurricanes, categories 3 and up. An interesting note about the Saffir-Simpson wind scale: Robert Simpson was born in Corpus Christi and used a damage field from Hurricane Celia back in 1970 to help categorize storms and develop the wind scale we still use today. Hurricane Celia was upgraded to a Category 4 storm with 140 mph winds on reanalysis in 2022. While the Saffir-Simpson wind scale is a great tool to quickly know how fast a storm wind speeds are, it does not paint the entire picture.
Historically, storm surge is the #1 killer when hurricanes make landfall. It's responsible for about 50% of deaths. Storm surge is a wind-driven rise in sea level as a storm approaches land. It causes significant flooding and can bring sea level rises of over 20 feet to coastal locations in the Gulf of Mexico. Things like size of the storm, wind speed, angle of approach, longevity, shape of the coastline, and subsurface slope of the underwater landscape can all play a role in how bad or not a storm surge is.
The worst case storm surge scenario for Corpus Christi would be a long track, large, major hurricane moving in perpendicular to the coastline between Baffin Bay and where Bob Hall Pier used to stand. Generally, the right front quadrant of a storm is where the worst of a hurricane's wind and storm surge will be located. Locations like North Beach, the Island, Flower Bluff, and the Oso Creek area are the lowest lying areas and the most susceptible to storm surge in Corpus Christi. Knowing the elevation of your property is important, as that can clue you in to whether or not you're at risk for surge if a storm does come this way. While storm surge is historically the #1 killer when it comes to hurricanes, the last 10 years have brought a different challenge: inland freshwater flooding. 57% of fatalities in tropical systems have been from freshwater flooding between 2013 and 2022. Southeast Texas experienced this in August of 2017 when Hurricane Harvey dropped 5 feet of rain. And when that happened, Harvey was a tropical storm and not a hurricane. A sobering reminder that storm category is not the sole indicator of the danger a tropical system can bring. Is it possible that people are caught off guard with tremendous amounts of rain from weaker systems? It's a tough thing to know for sure, but it is a trend we have noticed, and it's worth spending the extra time to encourage you not to discount flooding rain as a deadly tropical hazard. The second most hazardous threat over the last 10 years, rip currents, accounting for 15% of deaths associated with tropical systems. After that, it's wind at 12%, then storm surge responsible for 11% of deaths.
Tornadoes can also develop in tropical systems. These tend to form on the outer bands of that system where speed shear can accompany showers and storms. An example would be to observe slower winds at the surface and faster winds in the same direction aloft. The difference in speed can cause a tube of rotating air, which can extend to the surface. Tornadoes and tropical systems tend to be brief and on the lower end of the enhanced Fujita scale, usually EF1 or 0. Last year, Tropical Storm Harold produced a couple of tornadoes in the coastal bend.
While 2023 was relatively quiet in the Western Gulf, there were still 19 named storms, 4 reaching hurricane status and 3 reaching major hurricane status. While there was an above average amount of named storms, more than half of them did not reach hurricane status. That cap on the strength was likely due to the ongoing El Nino we were in last year.
This year, we're anticipating a shift from El Nino back to La Nina over the course of hurricane season. During a La Nina, sea surface temperatures in the equatorial eastern Pacific become cooler than average. That aids in lowering the wind shear in the Atlantic, Caribbean, and Gulf of Mexico, creating a more favorable environment for tropical cyclones to develop and strengthen. The transition to La Nina, coupled with abnormally warm waters in the main development region of the Atlantic Basin, should yield another active hurricane season in 2024 compared to 2023. Our 2024 KIII tropical forecast is calling for 25 named storms, 12 of them reaching hurricane status and 6 gaining major hurricane status. Some historical perspective: since 1950, 8 hurricanes have moved through the coastal bend and KIII viewing area. That represents a year-to-year chance of about 10% of a hurricane impacting the coastal bend. When you take out the El Nino years, since no hurricanes have hit here during an El Nino since 1950, the risk of a storm moving into the coastal bend goes up to around 17%.
If we are to observe 25 named storms in 2024, it would take us completely through this year's list of names and into the alternate list of names. There are 6 lists of names that rotate every 6 years. In the event a storm becomes excessively deadly or damaging, the name is retired from the list and a new name replaces it 6 years later.
Whether a season is active or quiet, your preparation for hurricane season should be the same every year. It only takes one storm to change your life.
With what looks like an active season in the tropics ahead of us, we're going to shift to some of the most important aspects of preparedness. When it comes to being ready for a storm, we'll get into things like home preps and when to board up after this break.
Our Hurricane Special will continue right after this message from RBFCU.
Banking should be simple, transparent, and most importantly, free. That's why the RBFCU Really Free Checking Account has no monthly maintenance fees and no minimum balance requirements. Plus, you can get paid up to 2 days early with direct deposit. And with the RBFCU app, you can easily deposit checks on the go, transfer money, pay bills, set alerts, and more. Make the switch to Really Free Checking today at rbfcu.org.
Stay connected to the 3 News Weather Team on all of our platforms and download the new Quick Reference Hurricane Guide. Packed with information you can use, especially when weather turns severe. Proudly sponsored by Church's Texas Chicken and AEP Texas. You're watching our Hurricane Season Special, sponsored by RBFCU.
When it comes to boarding up, I'm reminded of 2017 and the Harvey experience in Corpus Christi. While cities like Rockport, Port Aransas, and Lamar were experiencing the full wrath of Hurricane Harvey's Category 4 wind field, Corpus Christi was receiving tropical storm conditions with Category 1 wind gusts up to 87 miles per hour. Important note, Corpus Christi did not get the full force of a Category 4 storm. That hasn't happened here since Celia back in 1970. In 2017, I lived on the second floor of an apartment complex on the Oso Bay, floors both above and below mine. Pulling up to my apartment around 3 or 4 that Saturday morning, I noticed that the windows of both of the units directly above and below mine had their windows blown out. The blinds, they were flailing all over the place in the wind. My window, though, it was still holding together. Because my apartment was a bay-facing unit, I was sure that that back window, the one facing the bay, didn't make it, but it somehow survived the 87-mile-per-hour gusts in the area. So why? I don't think that there's a reason other than luck that mine survived and theirs didn't, and that's the way damage can go during weather events. It's one of the most common questions we are asked when storms are lurking offshore or they're headed this way. When do we board up? I want to bring in my colleague, Bill Churchwell, and Bill, you were here during Hurricane Harvey.
I remember it like it was yesterday. Going out into the neighborhoods following Harvey, I saw firsthand the destruction it caused all across the coastal bend. We know that a tropical storm can cause damage, but it's the wind threat from a more powerful hurricane we are the most focused on when it comes to protecting our property. In order to understand the power of the wind and the damage it can cause, you can see how strong these winds are. We reached out to Florida International University in Miami, where we found a unique solution. It's here at the Wall of Wind Research Facility, where meteorologist Eric Salna can use these giant fans to create realistic hurricane conditions up to a Cat 5.
The whole purpose is to test structures for their resilience.
The data collected can help find failure points in various structures, which can lead to better ways to protect your home.
You look at the weak links in the chain, if you will. When a hurricane is coming, covering and shuttering all those window openings.
That applies to doors and even your garage, because in addition to the threat of flying objects, wind pressure getting inside your home can also cause major damage.
Because if any of those points fail, now you start to stress the roof.
It's typically when the forecast calls for a Category 1 hurricane is when you should start thinking about boarding up. 36 to 48 hours before landfall.
David, you know, I love living here on the coast, but every summer it's something we have to deal with, and that's hurricane season, and sometimes we have to take action.
Absolutely. We have to take care of our windows, our roofs, and our homes.
David Galvan is with Galvan Roofing and Construction and talked to us about the easiest ways to protect your windows.
Plywood is the most convenient and the easiest. The best way would be to put a metal and R panel and have those cut. Of course, that's going to be a lot more expensive.
Having your boards pre-cut and numbered ahead of time will also save you the headache of last-minute preps.
Have them take the measurements on the outside of each 1x4, okay? And that way, if it's a little bit shorter or a little bit longer, it's not that big of a deal. These are a couple of things that we use right now that it's actually code for new windows that we have these Tapcon storm guards. Very easy to be able to install. Basically, it comes with all of this together. This goes onto the back, you attach your drill to it, and then you just screw it right in.
Some folks might use tape on their windows and think that's good enough. What are your thoughts?
Absolutely not. When you put just tape on your window, you think that's good enough. I mean, it's not going to do anything as far as strengthening your window. If a branch or anything hits that window or even a strong wind, it's still going to break.
Galvan said to check to see if you have impact-resistant windows. It's an investment, he says, can pay off.
A hurricane does come and something comes and hits this, you're not going to break through this glass. It's super solid.
Hurricane ties are another tool that can help keep your roof intact.
Especially if your home is older, on every single one of your studs. They look something similar to this, so that way you have them on all of your garage, all of your house. You can do it in the attic.
Shutters do work. Mitigation does work.
Meantime, Salna says stay updated as the storm approaches because conditions can quickly change.
Because if it does start to ramp up, then you're really going to have to start safeguarding your home. Better safe than sorry, and you could sleep better at night.
Gathering all of the right kind of supplies prior to hurricane season puts you and your family in the best position possible. In the event a storm strikes, my plan may look slightly different from someone else's, and that depends on your household. But in this checklist that we will walk through together, you'll see that no family member is left behind.
What can people do right now to go ahead and start preparing ahead of hurricane season?
Make a plan to be prepared, be proactive now, making those preparedness kits.
Speaking of preparedness kits, what does that look like?
You're gonna have emergency supplies in there, extra batteries for your phones and things like that. Make sure that you have 30-day supply of medication, hygiene and toiletry items, and that's everything that you can put into a bag that's gonna supply that you need for 3 days if you plan to go. So we call that a to-go kit.
Being new to the Coastal Bend also came along with some new agreements to not only protect my physical well-being, of course, but my safe place as well.
And windstorm insurance is a vital need here in our community. And as such, when you come into the area, you want to make sure that as you're renewing your insurance policies, that you make sure that you're covered with windstorm insurance.
Is there a certain timely deadline that people need to go ahead and start thinking about that insurance?
If you look at a global map of the world, you'll see latitude and longitude lines. And for us here in the Coastal Bend, what you'll notice is there is a latitude and longitude line at 80-20. It resides to the west of Cuba. Once there's a named storm in that proximity, most of our carriers do not allow us to bind coverage.
What's kind of the number one thing that people may not think about or kind of hurts them in the long run, even if they do have that insurance?
Start that documentation process early. As we saw after Hurricane Harvey, people came back from being evacuated to mass destruction. And one thing that people can start to do and prepare for early enough is pictures, lists of their contents, their valuables. So if there is damage when they return, hopefully there's not, but if there is and they need to start that claims process, they'll have an easy target list of everything that they had and values associated with that.
In your plan, you should also remember those loved ones that just may be a drive away to safety. Here are a few items you can go ahead and start to gather as you begin to prepare for hurricane season. Things like a gallon of water per day per person, non-perishable food, bank information, cash, and first aid supplies are a great way to get started.
We've covered the inside of the home, the outside of the home, but what do you do when you're asked to leave your home? We'll get into evacuations after this break.
You're watching Predictions, Patterns, and Preparations, sponsored by RBFCU. KIII 3 News reminds you that hurricane season is June 1st through November 30th. Make sure you have the 3 News app and stay connected to the 3 News weather team. We encourage you to download the new Quick Reference Hurricane Guide, packed with information you can use, especially when weather turns severe. So remember, when all eyes are on the storm, keep your eyes on us. 3 News, known and trusted. Sponsored by Church's Texas Chicken and AEP Texas. You're watching Predictions, Patterns, and Preparations, sponsored by RBFCU.
Welcome back. When it comes to evacuations, there's 2 types, voluntary and mandatory. In recent history, only voluntary evacuation orders have been issued for Corpus Christi, where city officials recommend that residents evacuate inland. I didn't grow up in the Coastal Bend, but I did grow up in another hurricane-prone place, the Houston area. I can remember evacuating a couple different times in my childhood. The more memorable of the 2 was in 2008, Hurricane Ike. My family left for San Antonio. But the first time we evacuated was in 2005, Hurricane Rita. 48 hours before landfall, the forecast cone stretched from Copano Bay here in the Coastal Bend all the way past Lafayette, Louisiana. I was only in the 1st grade, so my memory has some gaps. I asked my parents about it, and my dad said he can remember massive traffic jams statewide as millions of people tried leaving all at once. In his words, a nightmare. What I remember was that school was canceled for a storm, and to this day, I still have my daily journal that says, "We missed 2 days of school because of Hurricane Rita."
The city of Corpus Christi is broken up into different evacuation zones, A1, A2, A3, B, and C. These 5 zones were determined by the threat posed to each by storm surge as well as wind. Interim Emergency Management Coordinator Jace Johnson coordinates agencies and resources during emergencies like hurricanes. He says that evacuations are staggered based on the zones to prevent traffic congestion.
If you're in a more prone area, let's say if you're in Padre or you're in Flower Bluff, we have that staggered that as folks are asked to leave those areas, they'll be alerted first, right? Because they're in the most dangerous zones.
For lots of folks, especially those in the A1 zone, their evacuation route starts here on SPID because you can get to a variety of roads from it. And folks may come from SPID to here, FM 43, because it's a lot easier to head westward from here, and you can end up on a road like Highway 281, which can easily take you north or south. Where you evacuate to will depend on the storm's forecast path. For example, it would have been a bad idea to evacuate north to Houston during Hurricane Harvey. If a storm is heading north, you'll want to go south, and if a storm is heading south, you'll want to go north. Interstate 37 is not your only option. However, I-37 is the only option in the coastal bend that has potential evacuation lanes and potential contraflow. Corpus Christi residents without a car can still evacuate with the help of the Corpus Christi Regional Transportation Authority. Head to the nearest bus stop and they'll take you to the Corpus Christi Natatorium. From there, their buses can take you to a city like San Antonio. Corpus Christi residents ride free. You are allowed to bring your pets, but you must bring a leash, a crate, and any other necessary items. For those with disabilities or other needs, call 211 or visit tdem.texas.gov to sign up for the State of Texas Assistance Registry, which has to be done every year. When it comes to evacuations, Nueces County Judge Connie Scott stresses the importance of having a plan before an evacuation is recommended. She says a decision about a mandatory evacuation would be made carefully and include a severe threat to life and property.
They are not decisions that we take lightly, and we only make them when necessary.
And while her word is final on evacuations, she doesn't make the decision alone. Her team is in contact with local emergency management and mayors, the Texas Division of Emergency Management, and NOAA.
We're going to be talking quite regularly when those times come, and I feel certain that we will all agree and come to an agreement on what the best interest of the people is working together.
Both Scott and Johnson heavily recommend signing up for the reverse alert system. If an evacuation notice is issued, residents will be notified quickly.
This is a message from the reverse alert system.
To sign up for the reverse alert system, visit reversealert.org. But the best thing you can do?
Make a plan, and they decide right now that we're going to be prepared, because once we have a storm in the Gulf, that's not really the time to start getting things together.
Rip currents are something I'm becoming more and more familiar with as I learn to use them to help me paddle out into the surf lineup. When a hurricane is in the Gulf of Mexico, the wind is stronger and the waves become larger. This creates swells that will travel across the Gulf of Mexico, and dangerous surf can develop hundreds of miles away from the eye of a storm.
I think a normal Gulf of Mexico day is pretty calm here in Corpus Christi, but if there's a hurricane out there, it's definitely picks up the wave action and the rip currents.
Luke Matthews is preparing for his 10th hurricane season as a rescue swimmer for the United States Coast Guard.
In terms of hurricane response, it's a lot of people trapped in their house, on top of the roofs, in flood water.
Over the last 10 years, lives lost due to storm surge from hurricanes has dropped, but inland flooding and rip current related fatalities has gone up.
Even if a hurricane is not going to hit Corpus Christi, if it's still out in the Gulf, you're going to have higher surf conditions with even it being hundreds of miles away. So just be careful when you are at the beach, talk to your lifeguards.
Yeah. There's more than likely one right here out in front of us.
The rip current forms to get water back out to sea after the waves crash. The area without breaking waves seen here is a rip current. It looks calm, but it's actually the most dangerous place on the beach.
Our lifeguards will always talk to patrons on the beach about rip currents if there is a higher risk of rips due to the surf conditions.
The higher the water is coming up on the beach, the stronger that rip current is going to be, taking it back out to sea. But people like surfers are going to be using it at Horace Caldwell Pier and the Packery Channel jetties, where the rocks can be a dangerous situation.
2020 in particular, I can say I've probably pulled over 10 people off of the rocks.
Terry White grew up surfing across coastal bend beaches.
We had a lot of surf here, but also we had a lot of devastation along the Gulf Coast.
The strongest storm in 2020 was Hurricane Laura. It made landfall over 300 miles away, but a surf-related fatality occurred right here in Corpus Christi.
It's a tragedy. I mean, I would just say know your limits.
Rip currents are now the second most fatal threat after inland flooding. Both are now responsible for more deaths than storm surge.
Being rescue swimmers, you think, you have it made, but you get out there and stuff like that, and it can definitely take you for a ride. So just be careful. Even the strongest swimmers out there, you're not stronger than the current.
The Coast Guard is always working to be prepared for any scenario, but especially leading up to hurricane season.
Let's say there's, a ripping current on a jetty or something like that. I'm probably not going to be using the rescue basket in that scenario because how dynamic that environment might be. So I might opt to use the quick strap, and the quick strap is a tool that we can use to quickly put onto our survivor and get them out of that bad situation.
If you get caught in one, try to stay calm. Try to swim parallel to it to get out, and then wait for help if you need to.
We are all really kind community around here. We are here to help. We are here to educate. We don't want to see anything bad happen to anybody.
Our forecast will include the latest beach conditions here in Corpus Christi, and we'll show you how to find the latest tropical updates coming up right after this.
Our hurricane special will continue right after this message from RBFCU.
Banking should be simple, transparent, and most importantly, free. That's why the RBFCU Really Free Checking Account has no monthly maintenance fees and no minimum balance requirements. Plus, you can get paid up to 2 days early with direct deposit. And with the RBFCU app, you can easily deposit checks on the go, transfer money, pay bills, set alerts, and more. Make the switch to Really Free Checking today at rbfcu.org.
When it comes to Texas weather, you need just one team with one voice. Spend one day with us, and you'll know why we continue to be #1 in South Texas. 3 News, known and trusted. You're watching our hurricane season special, sponsored by RBFCU.
Welcome back. Thank you for staying with us in our 2024 Hurricane Special. A great resource to help stay updated on what's going on in the tropics is our website. We update it at least twice a day during hurricane season, and if there's something we're watching that may impact Corpus Christi, it's going to be updated even more.
Yeah, it's a fantastic place to gather that tropical forecast with a focus on our part of the Texas Gulf Coast.
We take a lot of time to explain the why behind the forecast and give our own thoughts on the situation.
It is a great free resource. We highly encourage you to go ahead and check it out.
While this season is looking like it will be a busy one in the tropics, it's impossible to say when and where a storm will impact months in advance. Regardless of whether or not the forecast is high or low, it's important to remember the mantra we use here every single year: it only takes one. So stay safe, stay weather aware, and stay informed this hurricane season.
You've been watching our hurricane season special, predictions, patterns, and preparations from the 3 News Weather Team, sponsored by RBFCU.